Get out! I want you gone by New Year's! Helen Parker's voice rang out like a taut wire. And you can forget about this apartment forever! Sarah froze by the kitchen sink, clutching her favorite chipped mug. Outside, a storm was raging, the thunder seemingly echoing her mother-in-law's angry tirade. "Mom, let's discuss this calmly." Michael, her son, spoke quietly but firmly. For Sarah knew her husband was trembling inside. "We just want to try living in the suburbs this summer, on our own." "Just try?" Helen threw her hands up theatrically. "In that dump? Michael, you're an architect, for heaven's sake. What respectable person would trade a three-bedroom apartment in downtown Boston for an ancient barn?" Sarah placed the mug on the widow's wheel. After 3 years of living under the same roof with her mother-in-law, she'd learned to hold her tongue. But today, something snapped. "You know what, Helen?" Her voice rang out unexpectedly clear. "That a barn has something your golden cage doesn't. It has fresh air. There we can breathe and feel personal freedom." Her mother-in-law turned pale, as if Sarah had slapped her. "Oh, is it so? So I'm suffocating you. I, who gave you the best bedroom. I, who—" "You, who walks into that bedroom without knocking," Sarah added quietly. "And by the way, we are practically newlyweds, but we still can't get used to it. You, who checks our closet when we are not home, touches my underwear, who—" "Sarah!" Michael warned out, but it was too late. "Get out!" Helen pointed a trembling finger at the door. "I want you gone in a week. And you can forget about your inheritance, Michael. You'll get zilch, not this apartment. Forget everything." The May evening was slowly descending on the city, painting the rain-washed streets in deep blue hues. Sarah stood by the open window of their bedroom, breathing in the moist air. Behind her, Michael was methodically packing their belongings into cardboard boxes. "You know," she spoke without turning around, "I really am suffocating here. Every morning I wake up thinking, today she'll be hovering over us again, counting every step we take. Oh." Michael came up and hugged her shoulders. "I completely agree, dear. And that house, it's really not as bad as Mom thinks. With a little fixing up, it could be our own home." Sarah turned to face her husband. "Can you imagine? We could get a cat, maybe even two, and nobody would grumble about fur on the couch. And you could have your garden." "Yes," Sarah's eyes lit up. "The yard is perfect. I've already picked spots for peonies and roses and—" They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Polite, but insistent. Only Helen could knock like that. "Michael, dear," the voice from behind the door was unusually soft. "We need to talk. Alone." Sarah felt her husband's shoulders tense. She knew this tone of her mother-in-law's, insinuating, almost pleading. This was how Helen started her most sophisticated manipulations. What would it be this time? "Go," Sarah whispered, giving her husband a gentle push toward the door. "Just remember, we've made our decision, right? There is no going back. Please, Michael." Michael nodded and left. Sarah listened to the receding footsteps, to the soft creak of Mom's bedroom door. Then she sat down on the bed and closed her eyes. Deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Helen wasn't the type to let go easily. The three-bedroom apartment in Boston had been her trump card, her way of keeping her son close all these years. And now that they decided to make their escape, from her mother-in-law's room came a muffled voice. "Son, I need to tell you something important, something about your wife." "Don't you dare say such things about my wife, Mom. Why were you even snooping on her laptop?" Michael's voice rolled through the apartment like the thunder of the dying storm. Sarah flinched. She had never heard her husband raise his voice at his mother. In the silence that followed, only heavy breathing and Helen's muffled sobs could be heard. A minute later, the bedroom door flew open. Michael was pale, his jaw muscles working. "Pack up," he said scoldingly. "Mom has crossed all lines. We're leaving right now." "But it's almost night." "Exactly." He started hastily throwing things into a duffel bag. "Well, she's taken her sleeping pills and gone to bed. Otherwise I can't be responsible for my actions." The old house greeted them with pre-dawn coolness and the smell of dust. Sarah flipped the switch. A single dim bulb flickered to life under the ceiling, revealing peeling walls and cobwebs in the corners. "You know," she tried to smile, "it's actually cozy here, in its own way." Michael silently embraced her. They stood in the middle of the empty room, listening to birds waking up outside. Dawn was slowly creeping through the unwashed windows, painting everything around them in soft pink hues. "What did she say about me? What made you so angry?" Sarah asked quietly. "It doesn't matter." Michael shook his head. "None of it matters. What matters is we're here. And this is our home, period." The days flowed like honey, slow, sweet, with a barely perceptible hint of bitterness. Sarah woke up with the first rays of sun, went out into the overgrown garden, and stood for long moments breathing in the humid morning air. Tall grasses clung to the hem of her house dress, dandelions lifting their yellow heads to the sky. "You know what? There used to be a rose garden here," she said one morning over breakfast. "I found old bushes. They're still alive. And guess what? I've decided to open my own small flower farm." Michael looked up from his blueprints. "A farm? Right here?" "Why not? The lot is big, the soil is good. We could grow flowers for sale. Make buckets, I have experience." "And connections with shops in town," Michael added thoughtfully. "You know what? That could work." Each day brought new discoveries. Elegant crown molding was found under layers of old wallpaper, an antique vanity with a tarnished mirror in the abandoned shed. Sarah cleared paths in the garden, planted the first seedlings, and the old house seemed to come alive along with the garden. But one morning, the silence was shattered by the sound of an approaching car. Sarah looked out the window and felt her heart skip a beat. Helen's familiar silver Buick was parked by the gate. "Michael!" Helen burst into the house without knocking, tracking mud into the hallways of her heels. "I finally understand. She bewitched you, lured you into this backwater. But surely you don't think I'm bluffing." She triumphantly waved some paper. "Look, the realtor found a buyer for the apartment. Have you thought it through? All you need to do is come back home, just come back home and—" "Mom," Michael slowly rose from the table. "This is my home." "What?" Helen choked on air. "So you're actually choosing these ruins over an apartment in Boston?" "I'm choosing my life," Michael said firmly. "My family, my future, without or with the apartment." A heavy silence fell. Somewhere in the depths of the garden, a robin sang plaintively. The wind rustling through young leaves, Helen's lost gaze moved from her son to her daughter-in-law and back. Well then," she finally hissed, "you'll regret this. Both of you will regret this." When Helen's car disappeared around the bend, Sarah turned to her husband. "What happens now? Will she really sell it?" "No," Michael took her hand. "Now I'm going to help you with the rose garden. But first, show me what you found with that crown molding." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Michael suddenly said quietly, "You know, she's right. We might regret this." "What do you mean?" "That she's seriously planning to sell the apartment. This isn't an empty threat, Sarah. She'll really do it. We'll never be able to afford our own place in Boston again. What a ridiculous choice she's forcing us to make." In the gathering dusk, his face looked particularly drawn and tired. Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, feeling a vague anxiety growing inside. Something told her this wasn't the end of the story. Something much worse and serious lay ahead. The morning was raw. Sarah wrapped herself in an old blanket, watching the wind tousle the last roses in the garden. Over the past months, her flower farm had started bearing its first fruits. Several shops in town had already placed seasonal bouquet orders. The phone's ring shattered the morning quiet. "Michael," Helen's voice sounded unusually hollow. "Congratulations! The apartment is sold. The documents are with the realtor for signing. You have a week to collect your remaining things. That's all. Take care, son." Sarah saw how white her husband's knuckles turned as he gripped the phone. "Mom, you really did this? Just to prove a point to Sarah and me? What?" "You thought I was joking?" Helen laughed bitterly. "You're my only son. I've saved this apartment for you all my life. And you traded it for some barn and that silly girl." "Stop it, just stop!" Michael's voice cracked. "Just stop!" He hung up and stared out the window for a long time, where a fine rain was drizzling. "You know," he finally said, "maybe it's for the better. Now everything's real. No safety nets." Sarah silently hugged him from behind, resting her forehead between his shoulder blades. She could feel something break inside her husband, like thick glass cracking. He probably hadn't believed until the last moment that his mother would go through with it. 3 days later, they drove into town to collect their things. The apartment made them with unfamiliar emptiness. Helen had already moved most of the furniture. "I wonder where Mom will live now." Michael looked around bewilderedly. "I'll be living with Aunt Patricia," came from the next room. Helen appeared in the doorway, haggard, with reddened eyes. "I can't watch strangers trampling through my home." "Your former home," Michael quietly corrected. A heavy silence fell. Sarah began packing the remaining books into boxes, trying not to meet her mother-in-law's gaze. "A young family bought the apartment," Helen suddenly said, "with a child. They move in 2 weeks, once everything's finalized." "With a child?" Michael froze. "Yes, a girl, 4 years old. She'll be living in your old room." Sarah saw her husband's face twitch. That room had been his little world since childhood, where he did his homework, dreamed of becoming an architect, drew his first pictures. "Well," Helen straightened her shoulders, "I hope you're happy. I hope your garden was worth trading it for your own mother." "Mom, you're doing it again." "No, don't. Just take your things and go. I have no strength left." They drove back in silence. The boxes rattled in the trunk at every bump. Sarah glanced sideways at her husband. His face seemed carved from stone. "Stop," she suddenly asked. "What?" "Stop the car, please." Michael obediently pulled over to the shoulder. Sarah jumped out into the drizzling rain and quickly retrieved the box with flowers pot from the trunk. "What are you doing?" "I'm going back." She determinedly started walking toward town. "To your mom." "Sarah!" "No, listen." She turned around, feeling raindrops mixing with tears. "We can't do this. We can't build happiness on someone else's misery. I'll talk to her. Woman to woman, no pride, no grudge, just human to human. She's not doing this foolishness for no reason." Snow was falling in large flakes, wrapping the garden in a white blanket. Sarah adjusted the string of lights on the porch. Guests were due to arrive in an hour. The whole year had been challenging. After that conversation with Helen, many things changed. The apartment hadn't been sold after all. The buyers backed out at the last minute when the bank raised the mortgage rate. But maybe that was for the best. Now they lived by new rules. Helen stayed in the city apartment, where they took the opportunity to do some renovations. But she spent every Saturday at their house. She still didn't approve of their choice, but Sarah smiled, remembering how her mother-in-law had stayed up last night helping her arrange buckets for a wedding order. "Sarah," Michael poked his head out of the house. "Mom's calling. She and Aunt Patricia are stuck in traffic. They'll be half an hour late." "That's fine." Sarah shook snow from her mittens. "I'll have time to finish with the greenhouse. By the way, did you remember to buy Mom's favorite pastries?" Michael smiled and pulled her close. "You know, I'm proud of you. That you went back that day. That you didn't let our family fall apart and end up bitter enemies. Mom wouldn't have stopped at selling the apartment. Who knows what she would have come up with next. But this way, we still won our independence." "Oh, I wish it hadn't required all those battle tactics." Sarah nuzzled his cheek. "Sometimes you just need to be wiser and more patient." The house was warm and smelled of cinnamon. A pie was cooling on the table, and in the corner a Christmas tree twinkled with lights. Sarah caught her reflection in the old vanity mirror. Tired but happy face. Not everything had turned out as dreamed, but then again, does real life ever match our dreams? Dear guests, please support the offer by liking, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing. It really helps the channel. Thank you.